For a guy who lived over a millennium ago, his predictions for our present era are terrifyingly accurate.
If just one of these predictions happens to come true, humanity is totally doomed.
So here are the top 10 scary 2024 end of the world predictions
Made by Nostradamus, Part 3. First up is the Son of Man. Believe it or not, this dude from over 500 years ago actually predicted the rise and takeover of artificial intelligence. Now, many Nostradamus prophecies require you to read in between the lines a bit, seeing as the dude was attempting to describe things that would happen centuries later. Like, imagine trying to describe AI without even knowing what a computer is. But given the context of AI, his prediction becomes a whole lot less cryptic. In his passage, the Prophet of Doom describes how humans play God, attempting to create a being in our own image, one made not of flesh. He goes on to say that this unholy Son of Man will surpass its creators in all things, wielding an unseen influence which shall usurp the mantle of governments from their makers, casting a shadow on the destiny of humanity. Now listen to that passage again and just try to tell me that he's not talking about freaking artificial intelligence. Like, it's pretty incredible.
Next up, we have an encounter with a rogue black hole. Black holes are incredibly mysterious and fascinating, but from a distance, right? If one happened to show up anywhere near us, we'd pretty much be helpless. They gobble up everything that comes too close, even light itself. So what if Earth got a bit too cozy with one? It's not a pleasant picture. First off, a black hole's gravity is crazy strong. It just pulls everything in. And once you're in, there's no coming back. At least that's what seems to happen. We really don't know where things end up when they get sucked in. Now, the real chaos happens before we actually get sucked in, though. As we get closer to a black hole, the gravitational forces start messing with everything. Tides would go bonkers, weather patterns would be completely out of whack, everything would be in complete chaos. Then Earth would start getting stretched like spaghetti, and once we pass the point of no return, we'd be gone. We have yet to develop anti-black hole gravitational pull technology.
Next up, we have seismic activity and sinkholes. Now, we already discussed crazy things like huge earthquakes in part 1 of this series. Definitely check that one out if you haven't already. But one detail I neglected to mention was how he described the very ground beneath our feet swallowing everything up, with entire nations plummeting down into the pits of the abyss. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds a lot like he's describing sinkholes on a scale we've never seen before. Now, sinkholes appear spontaneously in nature because underground there are layers of rock and soil, and sometimes these layers can dissolve or get worn away by water. Imagine like a big rock candy getting smaller as you lick it. That's basically what's going on underneath us. When water seeps through the ground, it can dissolve certain types of rock like limestone, and over time this makes spaces and gaps underground. And if there's a lot of water, or if the ground above gets really heavy, those spaces can collapse, causing a sinkhole. Sometimes even human activities like mining, drilling, or heavy construction can mess with the underground and trigger sinkholes. Now imagine massive sinkholes opening up suddenly, consuming entire cities. Yeah, not just tiny gaps in the road here. What if they were monstrous, devouring entire countries even? I mean, how could a sinkhole of these proportions happen? Well, you may have heard that recently Finland built an entire underground city, and Elon Musk plans to drill tunnels under Los Angeles for highways. Perhaps these man-made projects could fail, sending the entire city above into freefall. Okay, maybe not a nation-sized sinkhole, but still unfathomably huge.
2024 is also supposed to see an extreme power shift in Europe, and this extreme and sudden shift could spell disaster. Of course, these predictions are always vague, so it's not like there were any particular names used, but it is hinted at that a major political leader will be taken out by someone in his very own country. This will then lead to a big political shift that will affect the entire continent, and based on the title of this video, you could probably imagine that this power shift wouldn't be positive. Try a total collapse of the economy that will lead to many Europeans becoming displaced. So I'm not sure how many European viewers we have, but it looks like in the coming months, there may be a lot less of you because you'll be too poor to afford the internet anymore. And some of you may have to actually sell your computers for bread and water, and you'll be in one of those long lines where everyone's crying, "Oh, I'm hungry." I'm sorry, don't shoot the messenger. This is just what I've heard.
Next up, cybernetic enhancements are the mark of the beast. Back in the day, folks were all about spirituality. So what was highest was spiritual in heaven, and what was lowest had to be the material realm. Now, one of his predictions had to do with humans sacrificing what's highest, aka our spirituality, in favor of what's lowest, the material. Now, at first glance, you might think that he's trying to describe humanity's gradual disconnect with faith in favor of materialism, as we've seemed to replace God with Gucci. But read a little deeper and he may not just be talking about vanity. He describes a process in which mankind actually integrates itself with the material, sacrificing spirituality itself for a perceived strength. He said that those who did not receive the mark of the material blasphemy would simply not be able to compete with his fellow man. Now, the way I interpret it, personally, it sounds to me like he's attempting to describe cybernetics, kind of like how Elon Musk is developing Neuralink, which is basically a computer chip that puts the tech of your phone in your brain. I mean, just think about it. If I've got a calculator in my noggin, I could totally outperform all of y'all in anything, at least academically speaking, so it translates really well. As a matter of fact, pretty soon you might be able to transplant my entire head onto a lab-grown athlete bod, so I mean, that's pretty exciting.
Next on the list, we have the bird virus. So we talked about the potential for a world-ending virus to rear its ugly head in the coming year for human beings, but what if there was one that started spreading across another part of the food chain? Birds play a pretty important role in the ecosystem. They help control pests, they spread seeds around, and without birds, what would bird watchers do with their lives? So, if a nasty virus hits our flying friends and starts wiping them out, this would set off a chain reaction throughout the entire food chain, which of course goes all the way up to us. And most importantly, if the bird population drops, there'd be so many bugs, the birdies, they wouldn't be around to keep them in check, right? And birds eat plants, and that could mess with our crops and gardens. Less birds also means less seed spreading action, and that could also mess with the growth of plants. And let's not forget about the whole predator-prey thing. Birds have their own set of predators, like hawks or cats. Hawks are birds, so I don't know why I included that in there. But if bird numbers drop, it could throw off the balance, and some of those predators might start disrupting other parts of the ecosystem in search of food.
Next up, escaping the Earth. Now, Nostradamus predicted that by this year, the only ones who would be saved from the Earth's doomed fate would be the kings in cahoots with the devil, who has bestowed upon him the means to literally sprout wings and escape into the heavens. I mean, these are all metaphors, so we're not literally going Icarus mode. But you guys at home probably came to the same conclusion as I did with this one, as I'm sure this dude is talking about how the rich and powerful are planning on being shuttled off to Mars or a luxurious moon base or some space station far out there where they could sip on their cocktails and watch as the world unravels on account of the mess they created. Geez, Elon Musk actually ties into a lot of these. It really makes you wonder.
Apparently we may just experience the worst solar flare in history in 2024. So let's all pretend the sun's surface is like a pot of boiling water. Well, with boiling water, occasionally a bunch of steam kind of bursts out. Well, that's what we call a solar flare, folks. These solar flares can be pretty serious business. When the sun decides to flare up, it spews a bunch of energy and particles into space. If Earth happens to be in the way, it can mess with our stuff, especially anything electronic. Sometimes these flares are no big deal and we just get a bit of a light show up there, but if a really big one comes our way, it can mess with satellites, power grids, and communication systems. If the impact is bad enough, it could lead to economic issues. Imagine a world without the internet, power, and all the tech we've come to depend on. That could cause some serious problems, not just in our daily lives, but also for businesses and entire economies.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the Megalodon, and bear with me here. In the same passage about how humanity will create sons in our image to usurp us, he also talks about humanity wielding magic to give rise to the beasts of the past to devour us. super bleak, but again, this is the prophet of doom we're talking about here. So how can this one be interpreted with the hindsight of the present, and how the heck does it relate to megalodons, you ask? Well, I'm sure you've all heard by now that scientists are attempting to use genetics to revive an ancient species that our ancestors drove to extinction. Yeah, not the megalodon, but by this year, we will have hit the undo button on the woolly mammoth, which is impressive, but not exactly a world-ending species. However, once we do succeed in reviving the mammoth, the possibilities for bringing back other extinct creatures are endless. Jurassic Park, anyone? I've seen enough of those movies to know that bringing back the dinosaurs is a terrible, terrible idea. But it seems like the march of progress thanks to science, or magic as Nostradamus might have been trying to describe it, would undoubtedly attempt to bring back these demons if they could.
And we're gonna finish off the list with probably the biggest, quite frankly, the most plausible threat of anything on this list, the reptilian threat. So in part 2 we discussed the threat of an alien invasion, but another interpretation on that is that the threat of attack from other beings may not come from above, but from below the surface of the earth in the form of reptilian creatures. You've probably heard of this conspiracy theory before, that reptilian shapeshifters live among us already, taking on the form of celebrities and prominent political figures, seeping their way into our society, controlling us from the shadows. Well, perhaps in 2024, that's the year they make their big move, shedding their humanoid disguises as the rest of their reptilian underlings ascend from the cavernous depths to enact a worldwide invasion. Yeah, those sinkholes we mentioned earlier, that's where the reptilian hordes start like springing up from. That change in power over in Europe, that's the reptilian king rising to rule and enslave the people of the continent. And it all happens during the biggest solar flare in history, so that all of our technology just like conks out as the reptilian beasts descend upon us. It's gonna be quite the year, folks, so strap in. Anyway, with all that said, we hope everyone has a nice year.
And we'll be keeping everyone up to date on this channel as these events play out.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm James.
And I'm AJ, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.